This is why so many times, I know I've experienced this as well, you could be driving in your car doing those mundane tasks like we talked about, where we can get into theta because it's like a task that doesn't require a lot of mental effort, like driving or in the shower or on a walk. And a solution to a problem you've been thinking about for so long just comes to you out of thin air. It's because you're in theta. It's because you're tapped into your true essence. That's what I believe as well. But the science is showing it too. In theta, we can come up with out-of-the-box creative solutions.
Welcome to Alignment Adventures. This is a podcast where we explore what it means to live a fulfilling, aligning, and present life. I'm your host, Lindsay Tanner, and I am so grateful that you are here.
Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Alignment Adventures. I am so excited that you are here with me today, and we are diving into another science and spirituality concept today. So get in, buckle up. I got my science teacher hat on. These are so exciting for me to research and bring to you, and I hope you find them as equally as exciting and interesting. So today's topic is really going to be interesting to those of us who have a meditation practice or have dabbled in a meditation practice or are interested in a meditation practice, or even if you just are like interested in optimizing your brain and your life. Really, any of those categories, I think you're going to find this interesting. But what I want to talk about today are brain states. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about the brain, some interesting facts with the brain. I'm going to talk about how we measure these brain states, and then we'll get into the different types. And of course, at the end, we will connect it to spirituality and draw our own conclusions. And I encourage you to draw your own conclusions as well. So our brain is very complex, and we have come a long way in studying it. Obviously, technology has advanced, but it's almost like the ocean or space. There's still so much we don't know. It's just almost impossible to track all the nerve impulses and all the things that are going on. Because if you didn't know, the average human brain contains 86 billion neurons. Neurons are the cells, by the way. They're specialized cells. But 86 billion with a B. Like even 1 billion is huge compared to a million. I don't know if you've ever seen those videos comparing a billion to a million, but that is a lot of neurons. A lot is happening in our brains at all times, which makes sense, right? I can relate to that most of the time. There's a lot going on in my brain, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that as well. But what is happening in these neurons is our brain is sending chemical and electrical signals from neuron to neuron using neurotransmitters. And those are the signals that like alert you when something is hot, or, that's such a rudimentary example. It really is what's happening for everything in our brain. It's these chemical and electrical signals that is really kind of running the show of all the things that are going inside our brain and inside our body. Now, I do want to mention an episode that was very interesting where I talked about heart-brain coherence and the special relationship between our heart and our brain, and how our heart has its own neurons and it's also sending messages to our brain and to our body. So go and check that out as well. That was probably my first science and spirituality concept episode, and that was about 2 years ago. It's episode number 71, and it's called Why Your Heart is More Powerful Than You Realize, Heart-Brain Coherence. That was such an interesting episode, and I just highly recommend you check it out because, like we said, it's not just our brain running the show, it's also the heart. And again, like we mentioned in the first science and spirituality episode, there's so much we don't know. We are constantly discovering new things. Question everything. Be curious because we're always discovering new things. But with that, let's get into today's topic, talking about these different brain states. So within those 86 billion neurons, there are different signals going between each of the neurons. And these signals run at different frequencies depending on the state of the brain. Now, this can be measured with the EEG, which is an you know what, I don't even know if I want to try to say this, but I'm going to try. Electroencephalogram. My medical people or neuroscience people might be cringing at that. But that measures the brain waves of different frequencies within the brain. They just place electrodes on different parts of the scalp, and we can measure those impulses. And then the frequency is the number of times a wave repeats itself within a second. So now we're going to go into the different types of brain waves, starting with the slowest and then going to the fastest. So the first one is called a delta brainwave, and this is from 0.1 to 3.5 hertz. So like I said, this is the slowest of the brain states, and this is when we're in deep sleep. We're usually not dreaming. This is when our body is healing and rejuvenating. That's why it's so important for us to get that deep sleep. And I know all of us can relate to those nights that we haven't gone into deep sleep and you can feel it the next day, right? What I found interesting is that this is the dominant brainwave in infants up to 1 year. Isn't that fascinating? Like, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to children and brain states. But we're all in just delta brainwaves until about 1 year old. Scientists also believe that we can access the information in our unconscious mind through delta waves. And as we increase delta waves, we decrease our awareness of the physical world around us. So we will come back to that in the spirituality connection. But the benefits of this brain state is it improves memory performance by improving hippocampus function. It induces a deep state of body relaxation and promotes the release of human growth hormone. So all these things that we need to truly rest and repair and rejuvenate our body, rejuvenate ourselves. So this is like truly when we're unconscious. So let's go to the next slowest brain state, which is called theta. Now, each one of the sources I looked at was a little bit different in their range. I don't think that's super important, but just know that we're going from slowest to fastest brain state. But it said that theta, if you're interested, is about 4 to 7 hertz. This is when we are vividly dreaming in our REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. And it's also when we're daydreaming, when we're awake, we will be in this theta brain state. This is connected with creativity, intuition, daydreaming, fantasizing, visualizing. And this is super strong when you're meditating or in prayer or have some kind of internal focus or spiritual awareness. So this is that state between wakefulness and sleep. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I have recently a lot. The most random thoughts and stories and ideas come to me as I'm like drifting off to sleep. And I wish I could like remember them and write them down, but I'm getting ready to fall asleep. So obviously I don't write them down. And I remember hearing somewhere that this was a popular method with like artists and just like really creative people back in the day. They would get themselves to almost fall asleep to be in this theta brain state, because that is where like we have a huge amount of creativity. Here's a mind-blowing fact for you all, okay? You ready for this? Children up to 13 years old, especially to 7 years old, but you can see it all the way up until 13 years old as well, are in this brain state a majority of the time. What? I mean, it kind of makes sense. Think of how creative and imaginative kids are, right? Like they are just so good at that type of activity. I remember being that way when I was little, and I wish I could still access that. That's why inner child work is important. But like how mind-blowing that children up to 13 years old are in this brain state a majority of the time. This is the brain state where we can connect our conscious to our subconscious. So in theta brain state, great ideas are just abundant. And this also happens when you're doing something that doesn't involve you to think actively, like something that's really automatic, like when you're driving a route that you've driven all the time, like to and from work, or when you're exercising or showering or just doing some kind of mundane task. Like think of the beautiful ideas that come to you during those activities, right? It's because you're in theta brain state. Some other things that scientists have said about this brain state is that it truly is like a free flow of thoughts and ideation and occurs without censorship or guilt, and typically a very positive mental state. So this is where we can like get deeper than all those mental stories that we have. This is, I believe, where we can access our intuition, the state that we get to in internal guidance sessions. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but you can see how it connects, right? This is the state you can get into to access that deep wisdom and creativity and creative life force power within you. Now, what I also found interesting is some of the resources that I found. I will link them all as always. Said that this state can be seen or experienced as distracted or unfocused or creative and intuitive. Like it really just kind of depends on like the mood and the emotions and the perspective of the person experiencing it. So I thought that was so interesting. And I think I did an episode on this too, maybe last year at this time. No idea what number it is, but I talked about how I felt so anxious because I had so much creative life force energy coming through me. It made me anxious to not let it out. So just an interesting thought to have if you're feeling anxious. Maybe it's because you're just in theta and you need to get that creativity out in some form or another. So there are so many benefits that have been recorded from being in this brain state. Like I mentioned, it relaxes your body, it improves memory, it heightens your intuitive, inspirational, spiritual connection, it improves physical healing, you get better sleep, you release beneficial hormones related to health and longevity, you feel overall bliss and contentment, you have uninhibited imagination and creativity, which leads to out-of-the-box problem solving. Again, all these things we'll come back to again at the end. But let's go ahead and go to the next brain state. Like I said, we are increasing in speed with each one of these. So this is the alpha brain state where you experience alpha waves, and these alpha waves are between 7 to 12 hertz. This is the major state that we see in a normal, relaxed adult, like after completing a task or taking a contemplative walk or just taking a walk out in nature. And this is usually found in the back of the brain, which I found interesting as well, because there's another one that's happening in the front of the brain, and maybe you've experienced that as well. Examples of tasks where you're usually in alpha are taking a break from work, doing a light walk, practicing yoga or meditation. It's the state you're in right before you fall asleep. So right before you fall asleep or in meditation, you really kind of go between alpha and theta. It has been shown through different studies that creative thinkers tend to have a higher ratio of alpha brainwaves. And it's just this feeling of ease and calm and peace. You experience good moods. You can feel like you see the world truthfully. You have the sense of calmness. This is the state that bridges your conscious and subconscious part of your beliefs, which is interesting. We'll come back to that one as well. This is also related to daydreaming and visualization. And of course, you can use meditation, visualization, and breathing techniques to increase alpha waves. So the benefits of alpha waves are it promotes relaxation in the body and mind, reducing nervousness and anxious thoughts, boosts creative thinking, and provides us with more insight into heightened problem solving, expanded mental clarity, reduced anxiety and chronic pain, high blood pressure, so it's just good for our overall health. A lot of times this can increase athletic performance, motivation, inspiration, creativity, intuitive guidance, energy, and happiness. And very interesting part is this is the state where your brain can be highly suggestible, and we can actually reprogram the mind both in alpha and in theta. So let's go ahead and move on to the next brain state, which is the one I feel like a majority of us are in most of the time. I shouldn't make that judgment. Let's just say society as a whole is probably in this brain state most of the time, and that is beta. So this is going to be a little bit faster. It's 12 to 40 hertz. And this is most accurately associated with an engaged brain. Another resource described it as desynchronized active brain tissue. I think it depends on what you're doing, but this is the state of the brain you're in when you're listening to something or trying to solve an analytical problem, making a judgment, decision making, processing information, or just taking in the world around you. Other examples of being in this brain state would be active conversation, debating, negotiating, teaching, speaking, being deeply focused, decision making, problem solving, and learning something new. What's also been noticed is that logical thinkers tend to have a higher rate of beta brainwaves than any other brainwaves. Makes sense, right? If they're constantly trying to solve problems and think logically, they're most likely in beta. And what's also interesting is that what has been shown is that beta waves increase as we get older. And as with anything, really too much of any one of these brainwaves is probably not good for us, especially beta. If we're in beta too long, this can cause anxiety, stress, overwhelm, burnout. Makes sense, right? If you're constantly thinking, constantly trying to solve something, constantly doing something that involves a lot of mental effort, you're going to get burnout. You're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to have stress. You're going to start to see an inability to focus and be creative. Good thing we can avoid this by taking some breaks. We'll talk about ways we can go in between these different brain states later. But some benefits of being in beta brainwave is it's an increased level of alertness, improved focus, goal-oriented concentration, quick thinking ability, improvements in problem-solving capacity, and self-confidence. You know what I'm just already thinking about, and I don't even have this in my notes for the end as we connect it all, but I feel like our society is kind of switching from being in beta all the time to being more in alpha and theta. We're switching from being in our minds all the time and mentally thinking, logically thinking about things, to more of feeling things and being intuitive about it and tuning into our own truth. And it's really cool to see. It's really cool to be a part of. A lot of these things we're talking about on here already connect to so many of the observations we're describing in these different brain states. Now I have one more brain state, and it is the fastest that has been measured. Again, we're still studying all this. We're going to discover more and more. There might even be more brain states that we haven't discovered yet or been able to measure yet. But the last one is gamma. So this is from 40 to 70 hertz. And again, this one is less talked about, but this brain state reflects a state of conscious awareness that really embodies happiness, compassion, connectedness. It's really associated with processing a lot of information, learning at a high level. Think about how you feel when you're listening to someone that's an expert in a certain area talk about something that is so interesting to you, how you're in the zone and you're locked in. You're probably in gamma. And a lot of times they call this firing at all cylinders, or it's almost like your brain processor is getting an upgrade. So it's really higher level thinking. And this can be really difficult to study. So again, we're still learning a lot about gamma. But benefits of gamma are improvements in memory and information processing, accurate perception of our reality, compassion and positive thinking, advanced learning and intelligence boost, high focus and high energy levels, and reduction in depressive symptoms. Okay. That was a lot of science. That was a lot of information. I hope you're still with me. I hope you're not checked out yet. There were some tidbits in there that hopefully perked your ears, perked your awareness. But I wanted to give you all that information so we can deep dive into the spiritual connection between these different brain states, these different brain waves that we are constantly flowing between. So, as I've already mentioned, when we're in meditation or visualization or breath work, we're most likely in alpha and theta. That's why there's so many positive benefits to having a consistent meditation practice where you can just stop, slow down, tune into your body, slow down the brain. You're really kind of turning off those mental stories for a bit, or at least slowing them down, if nothing else, so you can tune into the different parts of you, because there are so many different parts of our awareness. Now, I really want to touch on that interesting fact about kids from birth to age 7 or at least 13. I've seen both, like definitely to age 7 and continuing on majorly until possibly age 13. Children are in theta. What that means is that is the brain state where we get, for lack of a better word, programmed. That is where we pick up all our beliefs about ourselves, about our world, which makes sense, right? Children are learning about this reality and they're in that brain state that is so creative, so connected already, but they're also forming new beliefs. This is why we get so many of our beliefs, conscious or unconscious, from our parents or caregivers. So whether you're a parent or not, whether you're a caregiver or not, I think this is just interesting on so many facets. One, if you're a parent, I try not to be like too anxious about this or too, perfectionist about this. But obviously, I'm trying not to implant unnecessary fears to my son or give him my own limiting beliefs or my own subconscious beliefs that aren't serving me. Rather, we're always trying to foster, and I know so many people try to do this as well. We're not perfect, but we try those beliefs of self-worth and empathy and compassion and gratitude and empowerment and acceptance and respect for all living things. They truly are sponges because they are in that theta brain state until they're around, 10 or so, somewhere in that range, which just blows my mind how powerful and precious that time is for children. And not to mention all the benefits of theta. Like, let's go back and look at all the benefits of being in theta, right? You are so tapped into your creativity, your intuition, and spiritual connection. We're releasing all these beneficial hormones for health and longevity. There's a reduction in mental fatigue and anxiety, overall bliss and contentment, and just that beautiful creativity to think outside the box. Like we mentioned, kids are so imaginative, and this explains that, right? Because they're in theta brain state. Now let's continue on with this. Let's talk a little bit about problem solving. We obviously do a lot of problem solving throughout our day-to-day, just being humans or in your job or as a parent or as just a human on earth, right? We are constantly experiencing problems, probably problems that aren't necessarily problems, but our mind likes to think that they are problems. We think that we have to do this in beta, and we may not necessarily know what beta state is, but usually we're doing this in beta, like high mental effort, really using a lot of logic to try to solve this problem, whatever it may be. But what if we got into theta state and try to come up with a creative solution? This is why so many times, I know I've experienced this as well, you could be driving in your car doing those mundane tasks like we talked about, where we can get into theta because it's like a task that doesn't require a lot of mental effort, like driving or in the shower or on a walk. And a solution to a problem you've been thinking about for so long just comes to you out of thin air. It's because you're in theta. It's because you're tapped into your true essence. That's what I believe as well. But the science is showing it too. In theta, we can come up with out-of-the-box creative solutions. So I just think that is a good reminder. Science supports it. If you can't come to a solution about something in your life, first of all, you can find neutrality like we talked about last week, or you can try one of the many techniques that are listed here and we'll get more into later to get into theta. And you're not trying to come up with a solution. That's the interesting part. It just kind of comes to you when you're not thinking about it, which can be the frustrating part as humans because we want to do things right away. But just try to find neutrality, distract yourself, go meditate, go for a walk, go do something mundane, go do something that makes you happy, and the solution will come to you in theta brain state. A few more things I want to say about theta and what I found out. I also read that it is possible to stay in theta for 15 minutes after you wake up. So this is why morning routines are so important, is because you're in that state where you can have the free flow of ideas and that sense of calm and peace that is just naturally radiating out of you, and it could be easier to meditate at this time. So again, I just encourage you to start that meditation practice in the morning if you haven't already. Maybe it's just a matter of waking up a few minutes early so you can do that for yourself. And another thing about theta is there's this thing called theta healing. It's popular with Joe Dispenza and other spiritual teachers like that. Joe Dispenza is really on the forefront of connecting spirituality and science. So if you're interested in this, go and check out one of his books. But theta healing is when we get into this state and we actually reprogram our subconscious. So those mental stories that we have nonstop all the time are not so loud when we're in theta. So we can use that state to just kind of rebuild some of our subconscious programming to serve our highest good. And also, I mentioned this earlier, but I am convinced that in internal guidance sessions, I am getting you into theta. Now, I don't have proof to back this up, but wouldn't that be so cool if we did do some scientific studies with an EEG showing what's going on in your brain as you're in an internal guidance session? But what we do is use your breath to get you in a deeper state of consciousness. You are in your body and you are tuned into your intuition. All those mental stories are quieted so you could hear that truth that comes from within yourself. So I always have those available. I also have my course that I made a long time ago. It's a mini self-paced course, very affordable, that you can use to dive into your internal guidance, or I have meditations and yoga flows and videos on my YouTube channel to help you with all of that. That is my purpose. One of my main goals is to help you get into that theta state. Now I can give it a scientific name, to help you connect with your intuition. So please go and check out those resources if you're feeling intuitively called to do so. So let's talk about gamma for a second. I found it so interesting that after we reach a certain point, like as they get faster and faster, of course, beta is the most mental one. We are possibly experiencing burnout and stress and anxiety there for too long. But past that, a little bit faster, is gamma. Gamma, where you experience that sense of what I interpret it to be as being in the zone. And we've talked about that before. Or maybe it's something from your alignment list, something that just makes you so happy to learn about or to do. And your brain could be firing at all cylinders and it feels so synchronistic. I feel like this is connected to heart-brain coherence as well, where everything's just synced up, everything's firing all at once in synchronicity, and that is when you're in the zone. And I also have another theory that like enlightenment, all the spiritual teachers talk about that certain people reach enlightenment, and you can kind of get there and not be there. It's not a destination, it's more of a state. Like happiness is a state. I feel like enlightenment could be in gamma. Again, just some conclusions I'm drawing, some connections I'm making, but that makes sense to me. So let's talk about ways that we can modify our brainwaves. Now, we've talked about a lot of these before already in this episode and on so many other episodes. But of course, meditation, visualization, breath work. Truly, the last one is just taking deep breaths can just transcend you from that anxiety-ridden beta, which beta isn't all bad. We'll talk about that in a second. Beta isn't all bad. We need it to solve problems. We need it to function as humans. But it can take you out of that state and bring you back to the peace and the calm and the connectedness of alpha and theta just by breathing. So powerful, so powerful. And that's why it's so useful before you do something that maybe you're nervous to do or you feel like a lot of pressure to do. Just take a few deep breaths, tune into your body, and go from there. I promise you, I know it seems simple. The mind and beta is like, no, I need to do more. I need to think about it a million times to come up with the solution, right? But just try taking a few breaths and see what happens. Again, be curious and open with all this information. That is the most powerful trait that we can have as humans and scientists and spiritual people, is just being open and curious. Now, the next one on here is called binaural beats. I hope I'm saying that right, binaural beats. I've seen these on Spotify, I've seen them on YouTube, but I didn't know what they actually were. Like a lot of times I'll just go on YouTube and pick just a sound that just seems it's like at certain hertz actually. Like some are like 999 or 777. I don't know. I'll just pick random ones and they sound good. But sometimes they say binaural beats. And this is actually specifically designed where one ear is listening to one tone and the other is listening to another slightly modified frequency. So it's like you're listening to the same note. I'm not a music person. Some music people might be totally cringing right now, but it's almost like you're listening to the same tone in different octaves or different frequencies. And that experience really promotes deep states of relaxation and sometimes even deep sleep. So if you are ever feeling extra stressed, like put in your headphones and find binaural beats. It's BINAURAL beats on YouTube or Spotify or whatever platform you listen to music. I'm sure they have some there. So that's super interesting. Science really is backing up that way to get us into a different brain state, get us out of beta into alpha and theta, and just really helping calm down the mind. And then the next one, again, this seems so obvious. These last two seem so obvious, but they need to be said, right? Just taking breaks from huge mental tasks. And I just want to be clear here. A break is not getting on your phone and scrolling on social media. I'm not sure what brain state you would be in then. I want to say you'd be in kind of like a slightly twisted version of alpha or theta, but not one that is serving your highest good. You're programming your subconscious, but maybe not with things you want to program it with, right? So just really being intentional with your breaks. Go outside, go read your book, go, if it is a show that's going to serve your highest good or truly feels aligned. Truly take a break, go and breathe, go and meditate, go and visualize, go journal. Give yourself a true break so you can get out of beta and just relieve some of that overwhelm and stress you may be feeling. And then this last one needs to be said, even though we all know it, but a huge part of our brain chemistry has to do with what we're eating, how we're sleeping, are we drinking lots of water? So just eating whole foods, getting good sleep, make sure it's really dark in your room, don't be on your phone before you go to bed, have a good night routine, blah, 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 all the things we know and have heard before. But I just had to make sure I mentioned them again. So I want to mention this, and I feel like anytime we learn something like this, like a hierarchy of brain states, and it's not even a hierarchy. It's not like one is better than the other, even though we kind of made it seem that way with the benefits. Being in one brain state for too long, I think, can have detriments to us as a whole because we are dynamic humans. Especially being in beta too long, that's where we get anxious and burn out. And even being in the other states too long may not be for our highest good. It's about finding that balance and that flow between all of the different brain states. Like we said, we need each one. We get a lot of important stuff done in beta. Our body rests and recovers and truly rejuvenates in delta. And then in theta and alpha, that's where we can have this beautiful, peaceful, spiritual, intuitive experiences and maybe come to different conclusions about our reality than just being in our brain all the time, right? So I don't want to say that any of these brain states are good or bad. It truly is about like flowing between each one of them and just having the awareness of which one you're in and moving to another one if that serves your highest good. Now, I want to leave you with like a summary from this quote that I found in one of the research articles, again, that I will link. It's from psych.com and it's from Dal Dotan Ben Susan. Again, I'm probably butchering these names and I'm so sorry if I am. But he is the director of research, Institution for Neuroscience Education and Didactics, which I had to look this up. Didactics is a method of teaching that follows a consistent scientific approach or educational style to present information to students. So that's interesting and something new to learn. But anyways, let's get to the quote. He said, "For me, a big part of spirituality is overcoming daily challenging situations with calm and care. When we lose it, for instance, what exactly are we losing? Nothing less than ourselves. We all lose it sometimes, but we can lose it less often by continually reconnecting to our best selves and to each other." And I think that's what learning about these brain states really reminds me, is that we always have the free will and the choice to come back to our truth, to come back to that connection with ourselves and each other. And we do that by moving through the different brain states depending on which one we need in that moment. But having awareness of each one and knowing that you have the power to move through them at any time is so empowering on your alignment journey and can really help you, like he said, when you feel like you've lost yourself or when you've lost it. We all have situations like that where we feel like we're going to lose it, like lose our SHIT, right? Or just lose our hope or lose our happiness or lose anything. You can never lose those things. They are part of you. Sometimes we just lose them within ourselves. So I hope you found this episode interesting. Like I said, I had so much fun diving into these topics and organizing them and bringing them to you in a fashion that hopefully helped you understand. It's fun getting back into my teacher roots. So please share any takeaways with me over on Instagram at Lindsay with an A, M as in Michelle, Tanner, or you can email me at hello@lindsay.com. I will link all that in the show notes. Please share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear this message or you think would find this topic so interesting. And I'm just so excited to continue to dive into these topics with you guys. I still have a list of things to dive into. If you have any ideas, send them my way and we can research them together. But I just love bringing this scientific data to back up so many of the things we've talked about. We've mentioned meditation in pretty much every episode, and here we have the science backing up why it's so beneficial for us to get into those alpha and theta brain states. So I'm sending you all so much love. If you need it, go and take some deep breaths, come back to yourself, and of course, I will see you in the next episode of Alignment Adventures.